It doesn't begin with bold proclamations or sudden breakdowns. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, a faint ache that hides inside the walls of childhood. A small boy sits at a rain-streaked window, watching water droplets race down the glass like tiny messengers carrying questions he'll never ask out loud. Am I loved? Am I safe? Does anyone really see me? The answers never come, so eventually, he stops asking. This is not a story of villains. It's not about obvious abuse or cartoonish neglect. It's about what happens when the emotional soil of a child's world is left dry, cracked, and unattended. Before a person grows into a man or woman, they are first an emotional being. Sponges, soaking in every tone, every glance, every silence. A child doesn't analyze their world. They absorb it. And if what they absorb is mostly confusion, dismissal, rejection, or fear, they start building their future on shaking legs, legs that still walk, still carry them through school, into jobs, into relationships. But deep inside, the emotional growth, the maturity, freezes. That's how you end up with the adult who seems fine on paper. They might have a career, they might have a family, they might be witty at parties, intelligent in conversation. But under that surface, a hidden child, locked in time, still waiting for the safety, the clarity, the love they never received. And that's where the complexity begins. Emotional maturity isn't about age. It's about whether you've integrated your past, whether you've faced the ghosts that still whisper from it. The emotionally immature adult doesn't face those ghosts. They build walls to keep them out. The first wall, blame. If something goes wrong, someone else is responsible. If they feel hurt, someone caused it. If they fail, the fault lies out there, not in here, because if it's someone else's fault, they never have to sit in the grief of their own unresolved wounds. They never have to meet that small, unregulated child inside. Blame becomes their safety blanket, not born from malice, but from fear. The second wall, denial. They deny their needs, or they blow them out of proportion. They might say, I don't need anyone, while secretly aching for connection. Or they might constantly fish for validation, reassurance, and attention, without realizing how deep the hunger runs. This isn't conscious dishonesty, it's psychological survival. If a child learned that showing emotion meant punishment or silence, they learned to shut off. Years later, they still don't know how to turn it back on. So they walk the world like actors who never take off the costume, performing confidence, humor, strength, while the inner child is screaming, please love me, please don't leave me, please don't make me feel small again. And nobody hears it, not even them. The third wall, control. Without emotional maturity, uncertainty becomes unbearable. So they try to control everything, conversations, relationships, outcomes. Disagreement feels like abandonment. Independence in someone else feels like rejection. It's not because they're power hungry. It's because they're terrified. Terrified of something they can't even name. The roots are buried deep. And this is why relationships become the mirror that exposes emotional immaturity. Partner becomes the stage where all the unmet childhood needs step out and perform. Arguments aren't just disagreements, they're reenactments of old wounds. The same fights play out again and again. But the real battle isn't about the dishes or the text that went unanswered. It's about being unseen, unloved, unsafe. You try to speak calmly, they react like a cornered animal. You share your feelings. They think you're attacking them. You ask for space. They hear abandonment. Because in their world, everything is survival. Love, to the immature adult, often feels like danger. Vulnerability feels like exposure to attack. So they don't do love. They perform it. They can laugh, give gifts, create happy moments. But when real emotional truth walks in the room, when conversation turns heavy, they retreat, or they lash out, or they collapse into silence. Because emotional maturity means staying. Staying in discomfort. Staying in uncertainty. Staying present when it's hard, just when it's easy. And that was never modeled for them. Then comes another pattern, one of the most painful, the idealization principle. At first, someone is perfect. An angel, a soulmate, a savior. But the moment that person sets a boundary, makes a mistake, loses imperfection, they flip. Perfect becomes terrible. Love becomes resentment. The childlike craving for certainty. The inability to hold complexity. Because complexity requires maturity. And maturity requires integration. So they live in a loop. Want closeness, but fear it. They crave understanding, but avoid self-reflection. They grab for control, but end up feeling powerless. And the cruel twist? Most don't even know they're in the loop, because awareness, true self-awareness, is the final wall, and no one else can break it down for them. To grow up emotionally is to grieve. To evolve is to feel. It means revisiting the exact moments you swore you'd never revisit. And that is terrifying. So they keep running, blaming, denying, controlling, idealizing, mistaking emotional reactivity for emotional depth, mistaking stubborn independence for maturity, mistaking intelligence for growth. But real growth isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the moment you cry alone in your car because you realize you've hurt someone and don't know how to apologize. It's staying in a conversation when every part of you wants to walk out. It's saying, I was wrong, and meaning it. The psychology of an immature adult isn't about shaming anyone. It's about seeing clearly. Because we all carry fragments of immaturity from the child we once were. We all had needs unmet. We all built defenses that protected us then, but trap us now. The difference is, some of us decide to stop running, to turn around, to look at the past directly, to unravel the emotional knots and ask, what am I still carrying? No longer belongs to me. That question is the beginning of maturity, but only the beginning. True emotional maturity doesn't come from books, degrees, or polished Instagram quotes. It isn't handed out at 21 or 30 or even 60. It's carved, often painfully, through the silent work of self-confrontation. And that's exactly what the emotionally immature adult avoids. They stay in motion, always chasing something, success, attention, pleasure, distraction. Because stillness feels like danger. Stillness means there's no noise to drown out what's unresolved. It means the ghosts get louder. Most immature adults never learned the language of emotion. No one taught them to say, I'm scared. I feel unloved. I need to talk about this. Instead, they learned indirect languages. Sarcasm, withdrawal, anger, deflection. They confuse vulnerability with weakness. They protect their ego like their life depends on it. And in a way, it does. Because that ego is all they've ever known. But here's the thing. Ego is not identity. It's armor. And when you live your whole life armored, you never really feel the sun. So they grow old. But they don't grow up. They gain knowledge, but not insight. They build relationships, but not intimacy. Because intimacy demands presence, honesty, and self-awareness. 3 things the emotionally immature adult struggles with. Not because they're incapable, but because they're unpracticed. And emotional maturity is exactly that, a practice. It's the discipline to slow down when you want to explode, to stay soft when you want to harden, to be quiet when your pride is screaming for revenge. And maybe most of all, it's the courage to listen. not just to others, but to yourself, to the parts of you you've silenced, avoided, or buried. Listening is the beginning of healing, but it's also the beginning of loss, because when we mature, we lose pieces of the person we used to be. We lose the justifications. We lose the illusions. We lose the comforting lies that once kept us safe. We lose the fantasy that we were always right. We lose the story that everyone else was the problem. We lose the belief that life owes us understanding without us doing the work to be understandable. The immature adult clings to these illusions, not because they're evil, but because letting go feels like death. And in a sense it is, the death of the small self, the guarded self. But that's a death with no applause, no trophies, no crowd cheering you on. It's just you, your shadow, and the quiet work of integration. This is why so many immature adults surround themselves with enablers, partners who challenge them, friends who excuse their worst behavior, workplaces where growth isn't expected. Because to be truly seen is to risk rejection. To be called out is to risk collapse, and their entire identity is often built like a house of cards. One strong gust of self-awareness could bring it all down. But here's the twist. Some do let it fall. Some wake up in the morning and realize, this isn't working. I'm hurting people. I'm stuck. I feel empty. That moment, that's sacred. Terrifying, yes, but sacred, because in that instant, a new life becomes possible. Growth doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like crying in therapy and speak. Sometimes it's writing 3 pages in a journal you never show anyone. Sometimes it's telling someone, I'm sorry, and letting the silence after hang in the air. Sometimes it's choosing to walk away from an argument, not because you've won, but because you've decided to break the loop. The transition from emotional immaturity to maturity is rarely glamorous. It's messy, it's slow, it's uncomfortable in ways no one warns you about. Because to truly grow, you have to walk back through the pain you avoided.